Good afternoon and welcome to Ensuring an Optimal User Experience for Patients, Remote Clinicians, and Other Employees, a Health System CIO Media Inc. production sponsored by ThousandEyes, part of Cisco. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the editor-in-chief of Health System CIO, and I'll be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll take them later in the program. Nice way to view the screen. Click on the top center, get it in side-by-side mode. Then you can adjust the divider to get the slides in the video boxes the size you want them. And it should say speaker view in the top right-hand corner. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to have our main panel discussion featuring Jim Brady, VP of Information Security and Infrastructure and Chief Information Security Officer with Fairview Health Services. Myles Angell, Director, INT Infrastructure and Operations with Baystate Health. And Gordon Groschl, Director of Infrastructure and Cybersecurity with Texas Children's Hospital. A little bit about our sponsor before we get started. ThousandEyes delivers performance visibility from every user to every application over any network, enabling you to successfully migrate to the cloud, modernize your WAN, and deliver exceptional digital experiences for your patients and employees. ThousandEyes works with leading healthcare organizations to ensure an uninterrupted experience for patients and employees accessing critical services and applications over the internet. For more information about their capabilities, you can visit thousandeyes.com/solutions/healthcare. All right, let's jump right in and get started. Jim, why don't you start us off? Can you give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Sure, Anthony, and welcome everybody to the webinar. Jim Brady, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer and VP of Infrastructure Operations and Security at mHealth Fairview. We're comprised of 12 hospitals, real quickly, about 56 primary care clinics, 36 pharmacies serving the Twin City area in the state of Minnesota. We also have a fairly new partnership with the University of Minnesota Medical School and the University of Minnesota Physician Group. So where we do a lot of tertiary and quaternary complex care in a pretty fair amount of work that goes on with our inpatient and outpatient visits and our pharmacy unit. We have, just a quick update, vaccinated 29,000 of our healthcare workers, 27,000 first dose, 56,000 patients so far. So we're doing a lot of work with COVID vaccines. And so anyway, excited to be here and join in the discussion.
Thank you, Jim. Looking forward to it. Myles?
Hi, good morning. My name is Myles Angell. I'm the Director of Infrastructure and Operations for Baystate Health in Massachusetts. So we are in Western Massachusetts, a system of about 5 hospitals and around 90 ambulatory practices, along with a reference lab. We've got, just as a population, about 3,000 people that had to go remote at the beginning of this and about 9,000 that stayed on site. So I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation and looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, Myles. Gordon?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Gordon Groschl. I'm the Director of Infrastructure and Cybersecurity of Texas Children's Hospital. Texas Children's Hospital is the largest pediatric institution in the United States. We're located in Houston, Texas, and provided services to the Houston community and now even beyond Houston to Austin since 1950s. And we currently have 3 hospital buildings and over 120 community locations in terms of pediatric facilities, health centers, and where we support our community.
Very good. All right. Next question, Myles. Let's start with you. Describe the shift to remote work that COVID necessitated for employees and the shift to remote patient visits it necessitated using telehealth. Tell us about what issues you faced and how you dealt with them.
Sure. So think we can all remember, I think it was March 13th or 14th. We went from, hey, everybody take a day off to we're going to keep this going. Baystate at that time had probably 300 people, maybe 600 who on a regular basis remotely worked. And we, like I said, moved about 3,000 people off site. So we had to use what we had available to us at that moment, which was RDP and Citrix. We have a virtual desktop environment that we have, but not near sized enough for everybody to go remote. So one of the biggest things was actually communicating the when and who would be working remote, right? There was a significant aspect of trying to figure out who could go and actually get their job done, as many of our managers and leadership weren't familiar with remote working practices. So that was probably a good 2 weeks of time working through that. Equipment's been a huge aspect of it, right? Making sure folks have the workstation they need or the device they need. We still have folks using personal devices to access our virtual desktop environment, which we'd like to do more or less of, rather, and give them the tools that they need. As we've turned on the world of telehealth, that introduced a whole new problem. Headsets and cameras were probably the biggest challenge to get our hands on. Most people did not have a camera. Nearly nobody has gotten a headset, even still, right? Lots of these things are yelling at webcams, and trying to make sure that that experience is proper. So equipment procurement was huge, getting it distributed out to folks, and we've actually, I think, transitioned to between 2 or 3 different telehealth platforms through this time, and actually looking to bring a third televisit platform that's more integrated with our EMR on in the next couple of weeks. But it is unfortunately stalled because of some of our other intricacies with our default browsers and things of that nature. So it's all interconnected, and it's a matter of trying to figure out which one's going to give us the biggest return on patient satisfaction and making sure our providers are able to do their work.
And those telehealth platforms, are you're using multiple at the same time, or you're switching from one to the next to the next?
At the beginning of this, we were, working with a couple different things, right? So in providing medical care, we use the Amwell telehealth platform, but we were seeing with the distancing that we had to have with our patients, trying to make it so that patients could communicate with their families became a pretty big priority. So early on, we used a program called Jitsi. We had Zoom meetings. We've had WebExes. We saw folks using FaceTime just to make it so that patients can continue to meet with their families and give them that equipment, right? Cellular coverage, Wi-Fi coverage, was, topics of conversation early on, and trying to make it so that, what's the standard, right? We've got a fairly large footprint, and everybody was doing the best they could to get through the day and through the weeks. And as we were trying to move folks off site, we were also trying to make sure that that patient in-person experience was going to be okay. So we're moving to the next version of Amwell. So it's not that we're abandoning it, but we are trying to consolidate the types of tools that we're using in the patient rooms, so that it's kind of a this is the way we do it, as opposed to this is the way we do it on this nursing unit.
Right, very good. Gordon?
Yeah, I think I can echo some of the items that Myles already mentioned. I think from a Texas Children's perspective, we started actually preparing for remote work and late in February. So Texas Children's, put together a task force that was comprised of HR, physicians, and information technology leaders to kind of start discussing, what exactly do we do if we have to move remote. Couple of good things that happened there is we were able to basically build on existing building blocks in terms of solutions that we already had, right? So similar to what Myles just said, right? So we had Citrix for remote access for, via RDP. We have VDI that was used, and we have VPN solutions that, we had in place. And so what we did is we basically prepared an expanded capacity, right, to support, the various groups. I think where we started, where it got complex is the logistics, right? Who can go home when, right? There was a lot of processes that needed to be put in place, from an HR side to really, manage the logistics of moving thousands of people offsite, giving them the right access, to the remote tools, making sure that they, understand what the step is to enable multi-factor authentication, right? Security is very important. Not everybody has MFA enrolled, so we had to do a whole campaign around MFA, making sure that everybody's ready to go, that when we pull that trigger, right, that we minimize the impact to our end user community. One thing that worked well for us was really, we put together, when we got close to the pulling the trigger, we had a command center stood up with we followed a Scrum Agile methodology to really start implementing very fast, these types of processes and solutions, and iterate on top of them to kind of keep, stay ahead of what the organization was trying to do. On the telehealth side, when we started that journey, we didn't have telehealth. It was an interesting thing, right? So Texas Children's, was just thinking about telehealth, and we had basically, I don't know, like 50 user licenses for telehealth, right? It was a completely isolated, solution that was used in one unit. And so where we struggled a lot was, again, compatibility, right? Different browser versions, across the whole organizations that do different things, that behave differently. The telehealth solution that we're using was in the beginning, there was a learning curve to that. Physician training was a problem. We didn't have the right physician support structure in place to basically translate business processes that they're doing in a unit into basically a remote consult, right? There was a lot. So the problems were almost more like on the operation side than on the technical side, right? So the technology was in place fairly quickly, right? Using cloud and on-premise, like a hybrid model, we were able to scale up very quickly. But again, getting the organization then to adjust their business processes, right? And in some cases, there's paper that changes hands, and all of a sudden there's nobody to hand the paper from one person to another, right? That caused a lot of issues and actually more work than anything else.
Very good, very good, Jim.
All right, yeah. I mean, our experience is very similar to Myles and Gordon, so I'm not going to repeat all the stuff they said. A lot of great stuff. So I think maybe just to highlight a couple of things. We didn't have the right internet bandwidth. We switched to a cloud-based VPN, which with a managed laptop makes it really easy. You just pop open the laptop, boom, you're connected. We did have some VDI, but it wasn't really ready to roll. So, but anyway, I think that kind of really helped our staff, which we have about 800 folks in the IT staff. So, instantly just add water, boom, we're working from home. So that's, so I think we've heard a lot of stories. I've read a lot, listened to a lot of webinars that just, many health systems and organizations that had to make that switch in a week or two. So I think we did pretty good. I think there were issues with just, working from home, which I think maybe we'll talk about it with some of the other questions. But, like some people, some of us have, an extra room, but others, they're working in their kitchen, their kids are, on Zoom, and they're doing all kinds, there's a whole host of things that make that home office like more challenging. And then just missing your colleagues at work and things. Just it's a different way of working. Some people just oh yeah, I love working from home, this is great. Other people are like, I don't want to be home, I want to be at work. So there's I think there's a lot we can talk about there. I think we all have really interesting experiences, but with a big staff it's going to vary. I think it helped us to go to Microsoft M365. So the more cloud we had already previously entered into, I think that really helped us, because that works a little bit better when you have a lot of people that are not at the corporate environment. Clinical staff, I know. Now I came to mHealth Fairview around April, end of April. So some of this I had to kind of ask folks so I could be prepared. So I wasn't actually here at the time, but there were there were issues with just how do you do a video visit from home. I spent a number of years at Kaiser Permanente, and the telehealth, they did a lot of work in telehealth, but the clinicians, were doing it from their office for the most part. So they had everything there. It was, the equipment was good, it was working. So I think there was just challenges there. And when you're not using VDI, there's the file transfer problems. And we did have multiple, telehealth products, Amwell, Zoom, we're affiliated with the University of Minnesota, so they kind of use Zoom as their preferred solution, and of course Doximity. Yeah, but another interesting thing I think is really interesting is even though we've been closing buildings and reducing our footprint for facilities, we've actually opened up, for us, we have 40,000 employees. We've opened up 40,000 remote offices. So it's kind of interesting to think, are those all the stuff we do to secure a remote office, a office now, multiple layers of security and double checking this and that, we're not actually doing that. So I think we made it through our budgets, our projects shrunk considerably. So we just had very focused things that we were doing. So I think that helped considerably when you're not doing 5,000 projects, you can get a lot done in the businesses. Wow, you guys are superstars in IT. And we have a lot of heroes at Fairview for doing, courageous work like many of our employees at our health systems.
I like that you opened 40,000 new offices. Right,
Really?
this is essentially what it is, right?
It is. There's a lot to be said about that, particularly on the security side, but just even with, having equipment that works. And, most people now have good, solid bandwidth, with 5G coming soon and gigabit to the house and things. I think, we're in a better state than if we had tried this, 10 years earlier. But, I think there's a lot that we could now go back and look now that everybody's working from home, what do we want to do to secure and minimize risk and just make sure we have good performance. Hopefully we're all looking at that.
Very good. All right. Next question, Gordon, we're going to start with you. How is your team able to diagnose and remedy issues as quickly as possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. So historically, when everybody was still in the office, right, the conversations were easier in the sense that, okay, you were monitoring the data center, right, you were monitoring the network, right, and most problems, right, you would kind of trace them back to a workstation, right, like when it's reported. Now enter this world of remote work, right, and all of a sudden these standard processes that are tried and true and have been used for many years are now basically obsolete, right, or even challenged, right, because you're dealing with all these variables. Well, what connection method are you using, right? Is this cable? Is it dial-up? Is it your phone that you're hotspotting, right? And which access method are you using? Is it Citrix? Is this VDI? Is it a VPN, right? So you have a much more diverse, let's say, service portfolio that you need to support, and with that, obviously, you need to adjust your processes. So what we did is we invested a lot of work into really ironing out our troubleshooting methodology at the service desk, right? So we put together a lot of knowledge articles around, what questions need to be asked, right? Like we gave basically the service desk almost like run books, right? And so okay, when somebody calls, okay, first step is check the location. Is that person in the office? Is it remote, right? And then if it's remote, okay, these are the things we want you to check. And these are the things that we want you, to verify, to really kind of hone in on the problem, right? And for, isolate the issue, right? And then we also put together, we have we use Teams, which was one of the things that got introduced with COVID, right? Like before COVID, we use Teams for our IM, internally, but now it became like this multi-platform, for conferencing, chatting, and storage of information, etc. So we created a Teams channel where basically the service desk is interacting with level 2 engineers that are cross-functional, right? So that includes network, security, platform engineering, which is our workstation engineering team, and workstation support. Right, and so there's a direct connection. So when they see users, with really strange problems, that they can immediately hand it over. On the monitoring side, we invested in another tool, right, to really get end-to-end service monitoring. going, and end-to-end means basically measuring service quality from an end user perspective, to help us, get a better handle on understanding, is this a systemic problem? Is it an individual problem? And so we spent the last 6 months to heavily configure and deploy that tool to help us better being able to get real-time data about our service health and our service quality, right? And then combine that with the service desk input. The other thing we did is before COVID, our user information, the information that we stored in our CDB about users, was okay, right? I mean, it had name, use ID, the usual things, but we cleaned up location, right? Because location all of a sudden became important, right? Before it was irrelevant or very little used. Now we needed to know, is somebody in North Houston? Are they in Florida, or where are they, right? Or are they in the office, right? So we invested a lot of energy to get that cleaned up and work with HR to get a location feed, right? And so we could understand, is this a remote worker? Is they in the office now, right? What device do they have? So information about the user and the asset management portion of or aspect of that became very important to us as well.
Very good, Jim.
Yeah, I was just thinking when I was looking at this question again that the best way to remedy an issue is to nip it in the bud with prevention before the issue arises. So I'm thinking one of the things I'm looking to do right now is to in my area, and I'll talk to my colleagues in some of the other IT divisions, is like making sure we're doing health checks on systems. We're spending not all of our time on preventing things from happening, but actually looking and detecting. So I think that's really important, especially in the security area. Most of us spend a lot of time, building firewalls and moats and large castle walls, but it's pretty tough to avoid those types of bad actors from entering in. So you have to do, you do need to spend time actively looking, seeing what's happening. But during COVID, the organization shifted and pivoted quickly with multiple types of command centers. So I think that we're still doing that. We have huddles morning and later in the afternoon. First actually hour or two of the day is just all these various huddles, and it all gets bubbled up to the to the higher level. So I think that's been really helpful to just understand what are the operational and clinical issues that have the highest priority, so that IT, we don't get hung up on trying to fix something that's not super important, because there's always going to be a lot of stuff to focus on. Yeah, and I think just looking towards more cloud services is something that we're doing. Running your own data center and trying to manage and drag along a bunch of legacy equipment. All that is just a lot of work, a lot of maintenance. And so I think as we move more towards a digital consumer-focused kind of paradigm in healthcare, I think we should leverage the stability that the cloud offers. So I think some advances there are pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to moving in that direction.
Very good, Jim. Thank you, Myles.
Thank you. So I'm very happy that this question doesn't ask how do you detect it, and focusing more on the diagnostics and remedies. Our teams, we did a couple things. Very early on, we actually supplemented our service desk with some of the smartest people that I have in IT to help triage and understand what the influx of questions are, and helping to remedy, those common, like, what are we missing from a user experience? We're getting 50 people asking for this sort of thing, to really be able to not take it as a single thing, but look at the larger picture. As we've gone further on, the world of issues, we've got a pretty robust situation management process whereby the manager on call is getting engaged, and once we realize that something is bigger than a breadbox, it's a little bit unusual, we're leveraging the same on-call paging platforms that we've had in the past, and folks are getting into kind of a common WebEx is where we land, that everybody knows and has programmed into their phone, to help to get to that diagnostics of what's going on, right? What are you seeing? What are you changing? in the background, Gordon, I had a similar experience with Microsoft Teams, and that I think it was February of last year. We had given it to IT, and it was just my teams that were using it as a, hey, maybe this is a little bit better than one of those other tools we've got. And then within 3-4 weeks, it's like, and here's it is for everybody else, and that's become a very common platform for, I regularly see questions. Hey, something's happening, and they'll cross team and ask, what's going on? Is there something bigger? So that's certainly helped us to get a lot faster about the diagnostics. And then the remedy side, sometimes we're able to do it remotely. I was thinking back that probably 30 to 40% of my staff aren't even off site. Right, they're still on site with the field services, walking around the hospital, making sure that the computers are up. We've got our data center teams continuing to run cables and make sure that the operations there are good. So we really leverage those guys as smart hands to help solve some of the problems that we have, so that our engineers who can work 90% remote can be 100% remote. And they've had to step up their game and say, instead of always being the guy doing and turning the screwdriver, to say, let me walk you guys through it. So that has helped quite a bit.
All right, very good. We've alluded on the help desk, and now we'll get into that a little bit more. Jim, we're going to start with you. How has your help desk team shifted with the changes in remote work and patient care? Was that team equipped to manage support tickets related to applications, EMRs, VPNs, or any kind of disruption? How have customer service calls from patients changed during this time compared to the calls received pre-pandemic?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we had issues with are very high call volumes. We didn't have an IVR at the time, neither on our patient contact center or on the help desk. So and then we weren't in the early days weren't leveraging self-service. So I think there's was a big focus on, let's start with the basics. So password resets is an issue that it was a problem solved a number of years ago. So it was a lot of work to kind of get that, and that actually helped offload a lot of call volumes. And then of course there were issues with COVID. We had service desk reps that couldn't be at work, so we had to leverage. How do we keep the staff? How do we staff up? So right now we're looking at what we call level 1, using partner augmentation to fill that gap. So when we surge, or when we so that we can have higher higher performance and have much quicker call to answer. We had some issues with call abandonment with our on the patient side with our contact centers. So also looking to implement IVR there. But with initially early on, it was lots of people calling anytime there was an announcement from the state or from the federal government. So lots of surges. Really difficulty with those volumes. So we're considering moving now toward a cloud-based contact center where we can have a lot more flexibility, and then just being able to flex more, I think, is really helpful.
Very good, Myles.
So our IT help desk, which is our service desk, I don't think that they had a major change. They're just getting buried with volume. But one of the things I do recall is the number of additional help desks we had to stand up. We ended up, creating one as a COVID hotline for our human resources team, which was run 24/7, to say, I've got questions. What do I do? Where do I go? And we've had probably 5 or 6 of those that we had to staff, and that we had to teach people how to be part of a ACD tree, and even leveraging our phone technology. We've got analog phones in certain cases, which proved to be a problem as you try to take on some of these more complicated things. So that was a big piece that we had to overcome. We're still looking to move forward and continue to evolve that, as that experience can still be better. But having folks have answers on the other side. How do we handle the call abandonment? Our IT team has a voicemail box that was getting flooded, that we ended up leveraging our data center overnight team to help with transcription, to figure out who's calling and why, and making sure that those partners questions were getting answered in a timely fashion. So the IT team, yeah, lots of calls, but our operators, right, the main hospital lines, we saw the same thing, Jim. Every time the governor said anything or our name ended up in the paper for whatever reason, we knew it because our contact center was saying, yeah, our call volume spiked really high, and we're not really sure why. But I think the teams have done a really great job. Our contact center we sent home, and they've been able to work remotely instead of having 200 people in a room. They're all working from their houses and leveraging the technology. So really, happy that they've seen almost no service disruption. Uh, there was a little fear, probably November timeframe, there was a big storm coming. And the fear being individual home internet cutting down. What happens when we have, 20% of our staff who lose power or internet? Right? Where are they going to go? Or can we bring them back? Can they sit and answer the rooms? How are we going to make this work? And that was a little bit of excitement because all of that equipment we had in our contact center had gone home back in March. So we had to procure and deploy it and handle that there. So it was a bit hair raising, but I think that the teams did a really good job to get there. And so far, I think everybody's real happy with what we've done.
If I can add to your comment, Myles. So one of the things you mentioned, the issue of support. So, as we started moving towards self-service and, getting people, we're an Epic shop, so getting people to use Epic, that actually caused, I wouldn't say it's an unintended side effect consequence, but, that automatically increased the support calls for that. So then we had to spin up actually a tier 1 tech support for our patients who, so how do you use my chart? How do you get a video visit, et cetera? So you would think, okay, as we go to self-service, well, you don't have to worry about it. It should offload it, but there are some things that you do have to realize that you still have to support. And, once people get used to it, I think then it's going to be a lot easier. Like now most of us can spin up a Zoom, conference, and we don't need tech support because it's kind of our computers are all set up. But that initial period of time of getting everybody, to initially get things set up is definitely challenging, and I think that just added to the stress that was going on.
Gordon?
Yeah, I think Myles and Jim already, made some great points. I'm not gonna reiterate everything, but I would agree with what was said, that I think the type of calls to the desk did not change, right? The volume was different and the mix was different, right? So when in the past, mainly problems were related to, the computer in the office, all of a sudden they were dealing with, my remote access is not working, or my remote, it's slow, or the screen is, somehow, not moving fast enough, when I'm clicking on something. Right. So you had different types of problems like that that you have heard before, but not to that extent. And so we definitely had to, do some cleanup, and as I mentioned earlier, around our knowledge articles and the tools that we give the desk, right, to better triage this. I was laughing actually when Myles was talking about, we had to stand up all kinds of other call centers. I think the first 3 weeks of the pandemic, right, when we sent everybody home and this became real, I think the biggest load was on the telecom team, right? We were spinning up phone numbers, call centers, like very similar, to handle all these new demands. One thing that we did, which is I think a direct result of the pandemic, is all of a sudden we started talking about, okay, how do we use bots, right? Bots became a thing, right? Before the pandemic, it was a phone number, right? Now we were like, okay, we don't have enough people, to answer all these phone calls. Like, is there any other technology that can help us? Well, now we put all these bots up, right? Like a bots to help our customers, to triage telehealth visits, a bot to to screen, people before they come to a patient visit, right? So we have all these bots now, and we put bots for the service desk and for a patient desk, right? So bots were a big aspect of us transitioning from a traditional, let's say, customer service model to a more digitally enabled customer service model.
All right, very good. Let's go to our next question. And we're going to start, we'll stick with you on this one, Gordon. Describe the changes you made to your architectural structure to meet the new demands. Were any of these initiatives in mind prior to the pandemic but hastened by it? Do you see them staying in place permanently?
Yes. So I was thinking about this question a lot because I think you can look at this from different angles. So one thing that I think fundamentally changed, at least at Texas Children's, was the speed at which we were moving and the speed at which we were implementing things. And with that speed and that demand for that speed, our architecture changed. I would say before COVID-19, we had a hybrid cloud, but it was not like we're still mainly an on-premise, application and services shop. But then with COVID-19, the demand for business solutions, rapidly increased, and the speed at which we were supposed to deliver increased. And so we were forced to start using different change our architecture and really start embracing cloud, and basically use cloud as a toolbox, right? And then use this toolbox to really deliver business value. For example, right, like we use Microsoft Azure bots, right? Like, and that's a technology we before did not use. We needed to enable this and go through, make it secure, make sure that we delivered, this in a quick fashion. And so we adopted Agile Scrum to really start moving these solutions at a rapid pace. And so we have daily Scrum meetings, right, that with our COVID team, where they basically work on all different kinds of initiatives. And the majority of those are actually happening in the cloud, right, where we use cloud such as Azure as a toolbox and augment our on-premise solutions, such as Epic, for example. Another solution that comes to mind that was accelerated greatly was Teams, right? So we were talking for years that we wanted to move from Skype for Business to Teams. Well, it took COVID-19. All of a sudden, Teams was rolled out in 2 weeks, right? And the business all of a sudden was like, oh, I like this. I want this, right? I like this idea of channels, being able to share all kinds of information, wrap business processes around. And so we rapidly started introducing Microsoft 365 based technologies and solutions for the business. And so do I think that this is a permanent change? Yes. I think that we're not going to return to where we were before. As a matter of fact, I think that we're actually starting to move this Agile Scrum rapid deployment model, where we basically have almost tiger team type of project teams that are quickly forming, implementing a solution for a business problem, and then dispersing. I think that is going to become the new normal, right? How we deliver solutions. Minus obviously your typical large epic upgrades and these kinds of things that require a very structured and methodical long-term approach.
All right, very good. Jim?
Yeah, those are good points, Gordon. Yeah, I was just thinking that is a good example. Contact center agents, if they're home using the internet, that's a totally different level of like, how do you get their quality of service to be the same as if they're on premise, where you have, on-premise legacy contact center equipment that's designed to work on a network that you can control, where you can't control the internet. So I think that, we have to change our architecture. There's definitely we're driving more to the cloud, and whether it's infrastructure as a service or whether it's using, SaaS solutions. But, the old architecture is just not going to work in, many ways. So I think before COVID-19 for mHealth Fairview, we had already been talking about, moving to digital, having that customer experience, really connecting with the patient. So we did some things, which I mentioned, we had the cloud VPN, M365, et cetera. But we also, I think that this obviously helped us accelerate. So now I think, just fast forward to right now, I think we're talking seriously about, what needs to stay on premise, and how do we get out of the data center business? So it's kind of like a cloud first mantra. where we're going to bring in something, does it need to be on premise? If not, let's look to see, can it be done on the cloud? We've had to redesign our network routing instead of everything kind of being backhauled through that single point into our data center. Can we go directly to the cloud? So I think that internet edge is an important architectural change that we've been looking at. And then just, with the increased risk of ransomware and healthcare systems getting attacked and things, really looking at what are the high risks of organizations. And, I think if we've got systems that are on the internet, they're internet facing, they're exposed, and are they 100% patched? If you got 100 servers and you do 90%, that's normally an A in school, A minus, but maybe 95, you got a good solid A, and 96, A plus, right? But the 4 servers for the bad guys to get after, that can take you down completely. Is there encrypted data on those servers? Are the keys encryption keys? So there's, I think there's lots of things that we can look at to focus on. I'm thinking there might be a case. I know we've had in all of my previous organizations, we've had some challenges with VDI. But the notion of thin clients going out for our 40,000 for us remote offices, I know we have the road warriors where you're on flights and you're traveling around a lot, but we basically just move people since that were sedentary at their office. Now they're sedentary in their room at home. So they actually could probably, use VDI and thin clients. So we're looking at that. Yeah, so I think there's lots that we can do in this space, and kind of excited about it.
Very good, Myles.
So yeah, I appreciate you bringing up VDI, and I'll get back to it in a minute. But I'll start with the, when I think of architecture, I think of our core infrastructure, and we're in the same boat that you guys are. You may be a little bit ahead of us in leveraging public cloud offerings like Azure and AWS, and we're looking to move more of our stuff out there and get out of, to some extent, the data center business as a health system, right? We're not great at it. I think of also the SaaS offerings, and many of the systems that we're talking about now, we're seeing a lot more SaaS being considered. Just get the whole thing out of here. I worry long term about the permanence of that. Those systems, can be very expensive, and the cost to change, maybe a little bit too much for us. So we'll see how those go. But definitely leveraging, AWS and working with, the inbound software to make sure that it's going to work on those types of systems, so that we're not saying, well, I got to buy a server and some hardware and it can only be a virtual system and it can't work in native cloud is kind of a non-starter if I have a vote. Not that IT always gets a vote, but the other piece of it is when I think about VDI, we have a pretty decent footprint, right? A couple thousand people on it. One of the things that I've spent a lot of time thinking is how much of this we're going to rewind. We've been pushing over the last few years of putting more and more people onto these virtualized infrastructure, and it's great for the office worker, right? You're using Word, you're using Outlook, you got chat, no big deal. With more and more people needing a video camera and more people needing a headset, one of the challenges we're seeing is the aggregation of that bandwidth and that equipment, and even worse with some of the thin clients not being able to keep up. We see that the video quality is way subpar on VDI. And there are techniques and tricks to get around it, but as we start to put all that processing power and bringing those codecs into the data center, is the user experience going to be the right one? And if I've got to, send you home with a camera and a headset and a thin client, and we get closer and closer to saying, well, maybe a decent laptop or, is about the same. And in fact, has some of those native capabilities that we're not trying to overcome, a virtualized hiccup. So there's a balance for me, with the remote workers thinking more and more about that. But when it comes to telehealth, the last thing I want is for the patient to see a grainy doctor, right? I think that the offset on the hardware costs isn't worth it at that point. The security is absolutely there as we look at being able to say, look, if the device disappears, it's a zero. But I certainly, I'm having an internal argument in my head right now on a daily basis, Jim, of saying what is going to be the provider device of choice, right? Because they want to bring their own device, right? Many of them are on, Macintosh, which is not our corporate standard. So they aren't on our network today. But as they, if they've got a $3,000 MacBook in front of them, is there a way for us to leverage that? Because it's going to have a whole lot better experience than putting them onto a Zero and another thing at their desks. So that one's in flux. That's still trying to figure out all the noodles to it. So I don't know. It's changing still, right? And the next platform, in 6 months they may say, hey, by the way, we need HD video and it needs to be 4K to the doctor. And suddenly I don't have the processing power in the data center for all that.
All right, Myles, we're going to stick with you here. We've seen a rise, you guys are talking about it a lot today, rise in vendor-hosted applications in the industry, and this has been accelerated. What's your current level of engagement with vendor-hosted cloud-based applications, and how has this changed over the past year?
I'd say that most of our projects kind of slowed down to a stall. If it wasn't directly related to our telehealth initiatives or net new feature set at all, I doubt that we adopted anything that moved from an on-prem to a vendor hosted in the last year, because that wasn't going to be the value add. We're seeing more of our, the SaaS stuff being considered right now that we're kind of on the other side of the vaccination and we're on the other side of the latest surge, that, folks are trying to figure out what is the project in the next 6-12 months. And we're definitely looking at moving some of our stuff around and trying to consolidate now that we've got 4 and 5 or 6 different tools that do the same thing, or, we found that this group solved the problem this way and this one solved it another way, get them consolidated. And the quickest time to value is probably leveraging one that's already in the cloud and just, kind of abandoning the other one so that we've got some level of standard. I'll go back to the point I made a minute ago, which is these things get wildly expensive as we start to talk about enterprise, 20,000, 30,000 user licenses. And that pay per person is not a big deal at 40 or 50 people, but at 5,000, 20,000, it gets ugly fast, and it's hard to justify.
Very good, Gordon.
This is a great question. So my team is also responsible for enterprise architecture at Texas Children's, and so I'm very familiar as to what we're seeing and what seems to happen. Over the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, there was a trend at Texas Children's that the majority of the solutions were basically SaaS, right? It was all SaaS, right? There were some solutions, where there's data gravity, right? For example, where they would still be in the data center, meaning, like your ology applications, for example, right? Where you have lots and lots of data, right? Those end up still in the data center, right? So these big legacy type of applications, we still see in the data center. And then we saw very little PaaS, right? And obviously we still were not ready for IaaS either. So it was basically a data center or SaaS, and the majority, like I was in 60% of those were SaaS solutions. I think the last 12 months have provided some shift for us as an organization. So we have been working on our cloud journey. Started in 2016. So we've been on a journey, right, towards a cloud first mentality, for a while, and it takes a while to get there. And so with COVID and the demand for speed, right, we started, like, cloud became the standard, right? And we started thinking about actually more, how do we leverage existing building blocks, right, rather than buying more SaaS. And so what I mean by that is, right, we're starting to morph now from a SaaS shop to a development PaaS shop, right, using Azure solutions, right, and Microsoft 365 to basically build custom solutions that support, the exact business need of our operational partners, instead of going out and getting another SaaS solution that overlaps with 15 other SaaS solutions that I have to integrate on a data level, right? And it makes it all like this gigantic spaghetti type of architecture that's hard to maintain. And so we are now actually pushing towards a standardized, standardization, where we, first we look if can we develop it, right? If not, right, then is there a SaaS solution? And if that, or an on-premise solution, right, and then obviously we're looking at, technical requirements that kind of drive, are you going to land in Azure? Are you going to land as a SaaS? Or are you going to stay in the data center? And I think that model, just is going to just increase, right? I think that, the cost of SaaS, the complexity, and having all these disparate solutions makes it very hard to provide a consistent end user experience. And so consolidating that into platforms and maybe apply the 80-20 rule in terms of functionality, solves a lot of these problems. And we're seeing this, right, because we are trying to roll back our SaaS. As a matter of fact, we have been on a journey for the last 12 months in the software rationalization effort. We're basically looking at all the SaaS solutions and, which ones overlap, do we need all of them, which one we can get rid of, what can we migrate to something in-house developed, et cetera, to just cut down cost of IT.
Very good, Jim.
Yeah, ditto to the Myles Accords comment. So I think once the major EHR vendors can get their production workloads running on cloud, I think we're gonna, all the tentacles that those impact with lab, radiology, everything, we're gonna see I think we're gonna see a big shift in that direction. So as I mentioned, we're also looking at cloud first. We recently did a proof of concept with our archived radiology PACS images, and that's working out really well. We just kind of moved that over to the cloud, and the performance is good, and radiologists seem to be happy. So I think there's definitely potential, for us to continue in moving towards the hosted or the cloud direction.
All right, Jim, we're going to stick with you. We're going to do a lightning round of final thoughts, word of wisdom, piece of advice for someone in a similar position as yours at another institution that's struggling with some of the challenges we've talked about today. What's your best piece of advice?
Yeah, well, really fast, there's lots of material. HealthSystemCIO.com has a bunch. There's webinars. There's many things that you can do to get information from your peers on how to make your situation better. So I'd say leverage your network, and I would say also just stop, look now, and reevaluate. Now that we're primarily remote, our clinicians are working remote as well as on-prem. What are some of the things that you can do to return life to what we used to think as normal, so that bring the human touch back in. And so I think if you can get some feedback from your staff, I think we can make it a little bit more balanced and a really joyous and happy place to work, which is our new work environment.
Gordon, a quick last word.
Yeah, I definitely echo what Jim is saying. So we'll take it maybe in a little bit different direction. A big lesson learned over the last 12 months was that the art of possible is something completely different than what we thought it was. No is not an answer, right? It's the possibilities are endless, and I think the new agile method of delivering solutions is here to stay. One thing that I think we learned as an organization is bring security on board early, right? Cybersecurity and protecting the data, protecting the patient, protecting the organization and the staff is a crucial aspect of any kind of remote work or remote access, right? And so having cybersecurity part of your journey right from the beginning makes that process a lot easier than bringing them in at the end and then trying to reverse engineer, cybersecurity requirements around NIST or HIPAA or any other standard. So that was one big lesson learned.
Good advice. Thank you for that, Gordon. Myles, we're going to give you the last word.
Sure. I'd say that I'll stick with lessons learned because I think the guys that did a good job there. So thanks to both Jim and Gordon. Biggest lessons learned for me were you can build it, but that doesn't mean they're going to come. It's a matter of communication. We've spun up so many different pieces of technology, and there's overlap because people didn't know it existed. I think the biggest thing I'd still struggle with a little bit is how do we give that FAQ, that answer to folks when they come on, that this is how we solve this particular problem, or these are the options available to you, because I still see messages through some of our surveys and help desk of folks asking questions that I thought were answered 6-8 months ago. How do I print remotely? How do I fax remotely? How do I get a new thing? And it shows to me that I could do a better job of making sure that my teams are giving those answers to our partners in a way that they're not having to submit a query somewhere. They just know where to go.
All right. Very, very good. Excellent conversation today. I see Jim and Gordon are typing an answer, so I'm not going to end the session until you get that typed out. But let's do our ending here. Regarding continuing education, you will get you can use the final slide in this deck as your certificate. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording of this event is ready. If you want to sponsor an event with us, you can reach out to our team. Nancy Wilcox can get back to you. And you go to our website to register for upcoming events. So with that, I want to thank our fantastic panel, Jim Brady, Myles, Angell, and Gordon Groschl. And I want to thank our sponsor, ThousandEyes, which is a part of Cisco, for making this event possible. And I want to thank you, our attendees, for coming. So with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.